Two Russian surface-to-air missile systems were destroyed within a few minutes by fighters from the 8th Air Assault Corps of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The Drone System Center of the Kursk military group detected the movement of Buk M2 and Buk M3 air defense systems in the northern Slobozhansky direction. The Russians tried to hide their systems in the forest, but Ukrainian fighters spotted them and delivered precise drone strikes. Each of these systems costs about $45 million. In the Sumy region, Ukrainian paratroopers destroyed a Russian four-post reconnaissance drone worth over $7 million. The drone was trying to scout the positions of the defense forces, but it was shot down. This is already the second such drone taken down by the air defense troops of the 80th Brigade. Chaos is being observed among the ranks of the Russian occupiers in the Kharkiv direction. There, the invading army is suffering losses from so-called friendly fire. Due to the incompetence of the command of Russia's 69th Division, assault groups are disoriented, abandoning their wounded and even engaging their own drones in combat. Taking advantage of the confusion in the enemy ranks, Ukrainian defenders from the 16th Army Corps eliminated 70 invaders in a single day and disabled nearly 100 pieces of military equipment. Meanwhile, in the Kupiansk direction, the Russian army tried to break through Ukrainian defenses near the settlements of Petropavlovka, Pishchane, Kurilivka, and Bogoslavka. On the Pokrovsk section of the front, the defense forces repelled assaults near Kotlane, Udachne, Fili, and in the direction of Serhivka. And near Huliaipol, the invaders attempted to push the Ukrainian armed forces from their positions near Dobropolye and Varvarivka.
Today, more than 30,000 Russians are not returning from the battlefield. The number of KAs has increased. By the way, this should also be mentioned. Ukraine's strikes have become more painful. Again, these are also strikes on logistics. Here, everything is connected, all elements of the same chain. So, in fact, there are fewer wounded now, partly because the logistics of evacuation have been disrupted, for example. Russian occupiers, when they arrive at the front, are immediately sent to assault units without any adaptation. Literally a day or two and they're thrown in. Because they need people, since the losses are enormous.
Operators from the 413th Regiment of the Raid Unmanned Systems Forces successfully destroyed a rare Russian electronic intelligence station, the Article S. The occupiers used it to detect the communication networks of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. The system was hit by a strike drone while in a protective shaft that looked like a concrete well with an open top. The destruction of this station left the enemy blind in one of the most critical sectors of the front. Border guards from the Guard Brigade's Reconnaissance Strike Drone Unit discovered the location of an artillery battery's firing platoon 23 kilometers behind Russian lines. Using FPV drones, the fighters destroyed 3 D-20 howitzers, a truck, and an ammunition depot. The final phase of the operation was particularly spectacular. 2 drones blew open the barn doors, exposing the depot, and a third drone struck the ammunition itself.
Our main objective in the strategic defensive operation that Ukraine is conducting, this is to inflict maximum damage to the forces of the Russian army. It is obvious that today such strikes, which are accompanied again by our middle strikes, deep strikes, and on the territory of the occupied part of Ukraine, on the territory of the Russian Federation. All of this works towards a common goal. Russia may obviously reach this plateau where it'll be zero in the near future. Zero. There will be no increase in the number of Russian troops on Ukrainian territory. In fact, we see this today.
And over the past 24 hours, Ukrainian Defense Forces eliminated another 1,170 Russian occupiers. The total combat losses of the Russian army in Ukraine have already exceeded 1,229,000 people. 8 tanks, 10 armored vehicles, 70 artillery pieces, 3 multiple rocket launch systems, and more than 170 units of Russian automotive and special equipment were also destroyed.
We welcome you to the broadcast. Glory to Ukraine.
Good morning. Greetings. Glory to the heroes.
Nikolai Grigorovich, I would like to ask you a question. Earlier, we provided information about the situation in the Kharkiv region and the attempts by Russian occupiers to advance in this area of the region. And tell me, if we're talking in general about possible, available data, does the Russian Federation actually have the reserves or potential to open, say, new fronts in the same Kharkiv region or in Sumy as well?
Given the active dynamics of enemy losses, every day 1,000 or more people, This was even noted by the Secretary General during talks with Trump. These are heavy losses for the enemy, especially in sectors where there is active fighting or where our counterattacks pose a threat. For example, we are carrying out such operations, especially near Pokrovsk, close to Mirnograd. Over the past day, we have advanced and liberated several areas. This is already something of an alternative, and we are ready, especially our combat units, for counterattacks. And the enemy understands this, but still tries to create alternative hotspots for advancement, thinking that we are weakening our positions in places like the Sumy direction. For example, Vyunakovka and the whole sector near Volchansk, the Volchansk hamlets, trying to create alternative movements of offensive units, so to speak. On the other hand, as we see it, Putin is setting the task of forming buffer zones on the border of Russia with Sumy and Kharkiv regions. That's it. But right now, the enemy does not have the forces or resources for strategic offensive operations. He can barely pull together resources, to be honest, especially for the most difficult areas. All the more so because the main objectives involve exactly those towns and villages that are decisive for determining Putin's strategy and policy. These are the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd directions. Today, it's also Huliapol and the Zaporizhia direction. And of course, there's Kostiantynivka, the Lyman area, and further on towards Slovyansk and Kramatorsk. These are exactly the strategic, frontline, and very difficult areas that are decisive for the enemy. But in any case, he is also working with alternatives. Considering that we can move troops, there may be separate breakthrough operations somewhere to show that there are successes in other directions. And of course, this also involves reconnaissance in the sector. For example, our press secretary of the Border Service speaks and says that we are carrying out active work. Well, here the border guard should, and as I understand it, do work both with the regular troops and with the special operations forces. Because the border guards are just actually one of the systems for protecting the border, and not the main one. They are only the first strike groups to respond, while the main resources in these directions should of course be held by the armed forces of Ukraine, working together with other units. That's why they're trying to find out whether there are any systematic and defensive structures there, whether there's an opportunity to advance, to show that there are already some successes. This advancement already has both military and political significance, both in the Sumy and Kharkiv directions. That's why it's more of a tactical and military-political format, so that, as Putin said, we are advancing along the entire front, when in reality there is no real offensive. But the demonstration of offensives is there. Yeah, sometimes there are diversions, certain breakthroughs, which we localize again. Well, with certain local battles. But once again, I want to emphasize, for now, neither in the Sumy direction nor in the Kharkiv direction are there any systematic deployments of units, meaning brigades, regiments, or divisions present today that would allow them to advance deeper into our territory.
Sergei Grigorievich, what do you think? How are they going to try to get out of these fantasies of theirs, where they've imagined that by April 1st, 2026, they'll be able to capture the entire Donetsk region? Well, for now, according to the Vostok military group, the enemy, the adversary, is suffering significant losses, and Ukrainian defenders still control both the northern part of Pokrovsk and the northern part of Mirnograd. So at this point, there's no talk of any advance. So what's the point of these fantasies then?
Well, today, Putin, the bloodsucker, needs to show some successes and present plans to capture Donetsk region, especially while negotiations are ongoing. He has already repeatedly told Trump personally and his negotiation team, and I think today they'll be telling the same thing to Witkoff and Kushner, that one way or another, they will capture Donetsk region in the near future. That's why they need to show plans for the capture. They said it would be in February. Now it's supposedly, well, March or April. I mean, even regarding Pokrovsk, I'll say it straight, this is already the 18th deadline set by Putin for capturing Pokrovsk, advancing on Kostiantynivka, and further moving through Donetsk region. So all of this is a failure. This is exactly the position of our armed forces. It shows that not a single plan is being carried out. Yes, we are retreating, we are maneuvering. Yes, we are taking losses, but usually it's about 1 to 6. That is, the Russians are losing 6 times more, so to speak. And we see it every day. It's thousands of people. And it's no coincidence that Rutte said during negotiations with Trump that 1,000 Russians are dying. Not, as Trump says, 1,000 on both sides, but 1,000 people from the Russian side. And the vast majority of them are in these difficult areas. That's why none of the plans will be carried out in April either. Yes, we're maneuvering both in Mirnograd and in Pokrovsk, holding sectors, but these sectors are not just to hold the city. They're specifically to destroy the enemy within the city itself in encirclement. We're not just defending individual sectors, we're also defending territories, encircling, striking from the flanks, hitting their logistics, and targeting their reserves. There's another tactic here that we don't talk about much. They're also pulling in large forces and resources here. And here we've developed specific strikes using drones, long-range artillery, and rocket systems against large enemy formations that are being brought up to these sectors. Mirnograd, Pokrovsk, or moving toward Dobrapilya, or to Kostiantynivka. These are currently the hottest directions, because the objective has been set to alternatively capture Kostiantynivka in the coming days. That's it, but for this, we need forces and resources. We identify them not only where there are small assault groups that need to be singled out, found, and destroyed one by one, but when they approach as brigades, regiments, battalions, that's when we strike. Why are the losses so high? We found a weak link: the frontline zone, logistics, and of course, the concentration centers for both manpower and equipment. That's why they won't be able to carry out such large-scale operations, since their forces and resources are now limited, even in the main priority directions. Yeah, the situation in Huliaipol is difficult right now. This is another tough area that we weakened at one time. Right now, there is some advancement. Of course, we're holding the north of the city. They're infiltrating different spots, houses, basements, and certain streets, building up their resources. But we hit them with fire wherever they are. We identify separate groups and hold a foothold both in the city itself and in the surrounding area. We're striking in other directions just the same. Right now, they tried to advance at Stara Ukrainka, and they managed to make some progress there. We're laying down a barrage of fire there, creating a kind of gray fire zone, and there's no further movement. We're also building new fortified areas in places like Zaporizhia, for example. This complicates the situation even more, especially during the winter period. We're cutting them off. Right now, the head of the GUR, Ivashenko, has just arrived, specifically in the Zaporizhia direction. And that shows, without going into the specifics, that these are of course systematic special operations aimed at destroying logistics, stopping advances, and reserves for the entire Zaporizhia sector. We're talking about railways, bridges, their deployment sites, strike groups, missile systems, drone strike systems, where they build their launch models and launch centers. This is a big, difficult job, but it needs to be systematic and comprehensive so that the enemy doesn't have the opportunity during the winter to strengthen their positions or support their, so to speak, aggressive structures that are in that particular region. Cutting them off in winter isn't just about destroying them by military means, that is, with firepower. There's also the cold. If they have neither food, nor warmth, nor ammunition, then basically it's neutralization within a few weeks. Will they survive? Yeah, but that's not possible there either, because people say that winter is supposedly Russia's ally. Winter is also used by us in terms of neutralizing them and creating conditions for cutting them off and isolating them. And winter will help, so to speak, finish them off or force them to surrender.
Nikolai Grigorievich, tell me, intelligence works with numbers, data, various inside information, and so on, right? And how realistic, in general, are certain forecasts and specific data that say that in 2026, the Russian Federation will experience a critical shortage of resources needed to sustain the offensive actions that took place in 2025? Yes, we're talking, well, in general, if we're talking about the data, about those stockpiles that are being depleted and are related to tube artillery, heavy armored vehicles, and so on. I understand that they are also now focusing on unmanned aerial systems and complexes.
Well, first of all, we need to assess Russia's strategic reserves. They are being depleted, including in terms of the production of high-precision weapons. Even the fact that they use smuggling channels, but systematically prepare missiles in large quantities and launch them in a limited way, still limited in any case, because they simply don't have enough components, especially from Western countries, in sufficient quantities. We identify components there, but usually these are individual companies that supply them through intermediaries. That's why by destroying military-industrial complex facilities, by destroying their support systems, including technological ones, and accordingly various types, For example, metals and, of course, rare earth materials, we are impacting them. These are very delicate and complex circuit boards, which are extremely scarce and, moreover, often unreliable. And of course, this includes the supply of lubricants with the destruction of refineries and other storage systems. Such comprehensive approaches have significantly undermined Russia's position. Just in terms of refineries, we're talking about roughly a quarter. And this, of course, includes supplying the army, supplying the military-industrial complex, and naturally the production of long-range artillery, tanks, APCs, and IFEs themselves. There are very big restrictions. Rails are still being made, but when it comes to producing electronics, the intellectual components, and especially the barrels themselves, there are already certain problems and limitations. Financial resources are limited. They're improvising however they can to find some ways to survive. So overall, both the economy and specific technological sectors have definitely taken a hit. And a very important factor is the reduction of their capacity for war. That's especially true at the front lines. We're saying this clearly because with losses today at 1,230,000, those are massive losses for Russia, and replenishing them is also very difficult. Many, so to speak, are limited in terms of intellectual human resources in Russia. 3.5 million have left the country. These are highly skilled specialists or top-notch professionals and technologists, businessmen who fled from specifically Putin's regime. And of course, many of those who remained have either, so to speak, gone to the front or are practically unavailable to work effectively across all the defense industry facilities. That's why their potential is decreasing, and I think 2026 will be even worse in every respect. These are the forecasts of Russian analysts. And of course, the strengthening of our Army's capabilities through high-tech means and purchases from the US, Europe, and joint production with our partners. Our defense industry, as well as purchases on foreign markets of any types of weapons, equipment, and ammunition, will provide prospects on the front line. Putin has no chance to outplay or win. That's why he will now, in any case, look for channels and try to reach peace. Yes, on his own terms, but we won't allow that.